Hey everyone, welcome to the Comic Book Report. My name is Dominic, and I'm happy to say we are here today with David Pepose. Welcome, David.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So I don't like to bury the leads on these shows, so I'd like to go ahead and first say thank you to everyone over at Dynamite for helping set up the interview. And I'd like to dive right in. The reason why we're talking today is that you have an upcoming series with Dynamite. It
I
sounds like you're
do.
going to be adapting Captain Planet. So
Yes.
what can you tell me about this project?
I'm so thrilled to be able to kind of relaunch Captain Planet in the year 2025. For those who aren't familiar with the original core concept of the cartoon, it debuted in 1989. And it was the story of five ordinary people from around the world who are given five elemental rings that allow them to wield the powers of earth, fire, wind, water, and heart. And when these five Planeteers combine their powers, they summon this immortal elemental champion known as Captain Planet. And so together, Captain Planet and the Planeteers, they fought what was called the eco-villains, supervillains that each had an environmental bent to them. They were out there trying to protect the world and protect the environment from human greed. And it was a show that a lot of times I think was overlooked. It was very much kind of a early stage of edutainment. Ted Turner, who created the concept or co-created the concept, was very much environmentalism was sort of his cause, and he wanted to kind of instill that into the next generation. And he knew that kids like superheroes, and so he was able to kind of wed these two things together. In a lot of ways, that show I think has been overlooked because in a lot of ways it was very much a PSA kind of a
Mhm.
show, but and not always known for its subtlety. But I think in a lot of ways, Captain Planet was ahead of its time, and now the world is finally caught up. Sometimes in some particularly unsubtle ways. So I do think that being able to kind of like bring Captain Planet and really kind of firmly place him in the year 2025 in our world. I think the world is finally caught up, and Captain Planet and the Planeteers really are the heroes of today's moment.
Yeah. That's so awesome. And it's cool to hear like what the original aim of this was. I'm a child of the 90s, so I very much grew up with Captain Planet. I'm assuming like I maybe hit some live airings, but certainly in syndication. And it wasn't
Sure.
until many years later that I realized kind of the intention behind it, which I probably should
Yeah.
have gotten earlier, but I missed some of the heavy-handed kind of environmentalist
Sure.
overtones.
Yeah.
But I realized that that was my introduction to a lot of it because it was guys just this really cool superhero kind of like kid show, I guess. And so
Yeah.
anyway, I love hearing this. I think this is so cool. Is this, and again, please only speak to what you're able to, but
Sure.
is this like a relaunch, or does
Yes.
this require that you need to know previous stuff about this franchise for those
Yeah.
interested to maybe
No,
ongoing?
this is a pure relaunch, similar to my approach on Space Ghost, where we this is brand new continuity.
Mhm.
You don't have to have watched anything in order to understand or appreciate our story, but we are going to be drawing in all these classic characters and all these classic villains, but we're adding kind of a modern twist on all of them to kind of give them, a really kind of distinct personality and
Mhm.
context, and just to make them really feel exciting and of the moment. Um, yeah, I think Captain Planet is one of those concepts that in a lot of ways is very timeless, but also the original cartoon was very much of its moment, and
Yeah.
history and geopolitics have certainly shifted quite a bit,
Mhm.
as it has pop culture
Yeah.
in the 35 years since Captain Planet first debuted. And so that's been something that's been really exciting for me is, for example, taking the Planeteers. An example that I always look to is Linka, who has the
Mhm.
power of wind. And in the original cartoon in 1989, she hailed from the Soviet Union.
Right.
Things changed, obviously, as the Soviet Union collapsed, and
Right.
she was originally the most conservative of all the Planeteers, but
Yeah.
Russia has changed quite a bit, and so
Yeah.
now our take on Linka is she's actually the most liberal and progressive. She's a member of kind of this undergrad eco activist band.
Wow.
And so she's really a true believer in this environmentalist cause. But as you'll see, she kind of has some wrinkles to her backstory that throw a little bit of conflict and all of that. And so doing things like that with all the Planeteers, Mati, recontextualizing him as an indigenous person from Brazil, And
Wow.
you see how all these indigenous people are being pushed out of their own lands because of
Yeah.
corrupt mining interests who want to strip mine their lands. And
Yeah.
sort of seeing, how does that background kind of impact who he is. Even Captain Planet himself, we've redesigned him.
Yeah.
We've got hot bearded dad Captain Planet. It's
There
the
you
only
go.
global warming I'll accept. But we wanted to really kind of focus on, he's known for his 80s look with the mullet and the crop top. I wanted to kind of update him to
Yeah.
really reinforce that he's not made out of flesh and blood like you and me. He's this sort of immortal elemental champion his body is built from the five elements.
Yeah.
So we've got, his hair is green fire, and he's got the rocky shoulders, and
Mhm.
and his eyes are sort of this piercing inhuman blue, and his skin is made out of ice. Really, just kind of a lot of stuff like that. But I do think that this is a concept that it really is. It's a product of its time, but it's something
Yeah.
that's so malleable and so versatile that it really did not take a whole lot to update it for the year 2025.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to see your take on it. I think I agree with you. It's like product of its time, very specific kind of time capsule franchise, and yet
Yeah.
it hits on so many like universal and kind of perennial issues. And so
Yeah. Well,
really cool. If I can ask
sure.
another question with Captain Planet while we're on it, how did you first get affiliated with this project over at Dynamite?
Yeah. So, I was very fortunate. We were talking about this a little before we started recording, but
Right.
Captain Planet's been my white whale for
Wow.
literally a decade. I've
Yeah.
wanted to write this for a very long time. I've wanted to write this specific story for
Mm.
ages. I pitched every publisher in the industry on it. And many of them told me, we're not taking any licenses. One of them told me, I want that license like a hole in the head. And so I've been carrying this torch for a long time.
Yeah.
And I've been working with Dynamite now for almost a year and a half. I've been writing their Space Ghost book with them. I'm wrapping up on our first year now. And so at San Diego Comic-Con, Dynamite has been doing this Warner Brothers Discovery Initiative. They've been publishing books based on Warner Brothers properties. And
Right.
at San Diego Comic-Con, they announced more books that they were bringing into the fold, including Captain Planet. And I saw Nick Barucci, our publisher, and my editor, Joe Rybant, at BarCon, and I walked over and I showed them the press release on my phone, and I said, "You're giving me Captain Planet, right?"
Right.
And I think they appreciated the enthusiasm. But similar to kind of, I wanted to take a similar approach to what I was doing on Space Ghost, that we're sort of
Right.
taking all the classic mythology, but we're wiping the slate clean. We're making it sort of an easy access point for anyone who's
Mhm.
curious about it. But I think it's the raw potential that really kind of excited me about all
Right.
this. And the fact that Warner Brothers has been such a wonderful licensor to work with,
Yeah.
similar to my approach on Space Ghost, they've given us so much latitude to
Yeah.
really kind of like follow our instincts and really kind of push this concept in the most exciting way possible. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I've been a true believer for a long time, and I'm very excited for this story to finally see the light of day.
I am so excited to hear that. As someone who, again, kind of grew up with Captain Planet, I liked the franchise. I even liked when Don Cheadle showed up as Captain Planet. I don't know if that was SNL or whatever that was, but
Yeah,
I'm here for it. So I'm really excited to hear this, and the fact that this was actually a passion project, like dream project for you, makes
yeah.
me even more excited to check it out.
Well,
Um,
oh, go
mhm.
ahead.
No, no, please.
Well, I was going to say the thing that really kind of attracted me to Captain Planet as a property, it really kind of the light bulb went off 10 years ago. I watched Avatar: The Last Airbender for the
Yeah,
first time, and I remember watching it and saying, "Oh, that's." I was so impressed with that show, and
yeah,
thinking, "Oh, like it'd be so cool to be able to do something like that." And then I thought, "Oh, like if only Captain Planet hadn't come out before Avatar, you could have done some really cool, interesting stuff with the
yeah,
various elemental powers." And
yeah,
then my next thought was, "I could do that. I could do
yeah,
that." And so, Captain Planet as a property, I think it really speaks to a lot of values that I have as both a writer and as a human being. I love the fact that it's inherently multicultural and diverse, and
right,
in a way that I don't think I've seen in a pop culture franchise since Claremont's X-Men.
Yeah. Good
You've
point.
got this international team from all different walks of life, and that it was so intentional. I mean,
Yeah.
I know that there are certain bad actors on the internet who shake their fist at any sort of diversity. I
Sure.
think you can't find any more of an organic way to do that than in
Yeah.
Captain Planet.
Yeah.
I think that's core part of the concept. It's all about empathy. It's all about building a coalition. It's all about people from different walks of life meeting one another and then and creating bonds, but also figuring out how do you navigate the individual tensions of just different
Yeah.
personalities.
I mean,
And
planet is literally in the name. It speaks
yeah,
to this kind of
it,
broad. Yeah.
and I think there's a lot of room for some very cool character work as a
Yeah.
result. The team
100%.
building of it all is so exciting, and then you're able to, the what they face is so timely.
Mhm.
And back in 1989, climate change was seen almost as a hypothetical. The hole in the ozone layer was sort of the biggest concern. But
Yeah.
now we're living through climate change. I lived in New York when Hurricane Sandy hit. I live in Los Angeles now, which just had
Yeah.
the wildfires.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
My family lives in the Midwest that just had record freezing temperatures.
Yeah.
Climate change isn't hypothetical anymore. We're living in it. And the cost is, it's people on the ground. People have their houses burned down, or they have their houses flooded.
Yeah.
Houses falling into the ocean and the coastline. And on the flip side of that, and something that I thought was so forward thinking of the original Captain Planet cartoon to the point where it'd be considered subversive
Yeah.
today, is that the other side of the coin is human greed. Is
Yeah.
that there are always people who are looking to consolidate wealth and power, and they don't really they don't care who gets hurt in the crossfire. They don't care about the
Yeah.
little guy.
Yeah.
They feel like they are rich and powerful enough to buy their way out of any consequences, and
Yeah.
that's something that I think a lot of people can relate to in the year 2025.
Yeah.
Where you have billionaires and industrials who have such an outsized influence on government and the way and just daily life. And so I think that was something that was so fascinating about the concept. That's something that we're kind of digging into in our book,
Yeah.
is that Captain Planet's motto is the power is yours, right?
Yeah.
And that cuts both ways. On the one hand, it means you can't just have a genie summoned and it wipes all your problems away. This has to be something that's solved on the ground level by ordinary people from all
Right.
around the world. But also the flip side of that, our problems, the system that's putting us all in danger, is being perpetuated by
Yeah.
people on the ground. And then on top of that, I think pop culture has really evolved in such a cool way. We talked about Avatar: The Last Airbender, and we're
Right.
absolutely throwing in a lot of influences from that into this
Awesome.
Captain Planet, Planeteers, and the way that they navigate action sequences, but
Yeah.
also, the mythology of it all. And that we're digging into some really cool stuff with that. The
Awesome.
implications of it all. The original series had a Gaia as the spirit of the earth, and she was this immortal being who summons the Planeteers. And we're recontextualizing her a little bit for our series. We're reframing her as a generational Dalai Lama kind of figure.
Interesting. Okay.
The idea of Cap and a human being as sort of this symbiotic duo, I think is really important to the concept.
Yeah.
Um, but that also means that Captain Planet himself has had a lot of adventures over the millennia, and
Yeah.
we're going to get to kind of take quick glimpses at that. And I think that really adds kind of a sense of scale
Mhm.
and history to all of this. Is that Captain Planet isn't just coming out of nowhere.
Yeah.
He's been kind of weaving in and out of kind of core moments in history, and I'm very excited for readers to get to see interesting spots where Cap has actually popped up in the past.
Wow. Cool. Well, we look forward to checking that out. I'm really excited about that. To pivot a little bit, you've mentioned this
Yeah,
project a couple times, and I have to admit, I have yet to check out your Space Ghost series. And honestly, it's on my tippy top list over at Dynamite of books I need to check out. Like I put it up that one and what's the other really big one I've been wanting to check out? Johnny Quest. Those two
yeah,
are like I just need to check them out. I remember again growing up through the 90s and stuff and early 2000s. I remember the most culturally relevant thing with Space Ghost was Coast to Coast, but
sure.
obviously I know that was based on a previous animated property that I remember a
Yeah.
little bit of as well. And I know Space Ghost, your run here has already been going for a while now. Are you guys in double digits for those issues yet?
Issue 10 comes out next week.
There we go.
So
Okay, so I'm
yes.
tracking. I'm tracking.
Yeah, so if Captain Planet is kind of my riff on the X-Men, Space Ghost is my riff on Batman. For those who aren't familiar with Space Ghost as a concept, that was a 60s cartoon that debuted right on the heels of Adam West Batman. Adam West Batman was such a seismic shift in the marketplace that everybody was either trying to license out pre-existing superheroes or trying to create superheroes of their own. And Alex Toth, who was considered the Jack Kirby of Hanna-Barbera,
Right.
he was instrumental in creating Space Ghost, who I've pitched our book as sort of Batman: The Long Halloween meets The Mandalorian. It's about how
I've
this
got to get this
cosmic
book.
vigilance. Yeah, you're like we've
So
had
behind.
we've had a lot of fun on that book.
Yeah.
And sort of our series is about how this cosmic vigilante winds up encountering two orphans and their pet monkey. And
Yeah.
how do they go from being sort of these orphaned rescues to becoming his partners in crime fighting, and then eventually sort of a found family. And that's been a really fun book to write. We sort of approached it as a lot of done in ones, a lot of done in twos. Ryan North's Fantastic Four and Steve Orlando's Scarlet Witch and Jed McKay's Moon Knight were big influences on that. And Space Ghost is a character that's so cool because his rogues gallery is so amazing. He really does have a rogues gallery that's every bit as diverse and exciting as like a Batman or a Spider-Man. And so we have a lot of raw material to draw from. And at the same time, we've got this kind of emotional core to all of it. For anyone who's watched Jurassic Park, seeing the dynamic between Dr. Grant and Tim and Lex, that's very much the vibe that Space Ghost has with his sidekicks Jan and Jace. Is he's been a loner for so long and he's kind of marinated in his own tragedy. But it's hard to kind of maintain that gruff figure when you've got these two kids who are around you all the time. And so watching Space Ghost kind of soften a little bit and watching him, start to become this father figure to these kids who desperately need it. That's the heart of the book that kind of anchors all the pyrotechnics of the supervillains. I'm so thrilled with the way that book has come together. Jonathan Lau, our artist on the book, is amazing, and he draws like a demon. He's so fast and he's so talented. He just wrapped up in issue 12 this morning, and he's really just next level. And I'm so thrilled to be able to work with him and colorist Andrew Dahlhaus and letterer Taylor Esposito on the book. So yeah, it's been very fun. The first trade paperback is in stores, so you can order it at your comic shop or online. And like we said, issue 10 comes out next week. It features Space Spectre, who is sort of a dark mirror version of Space Ghost. I pitched that issue as Space Ghost versus Dark Knight Returns Space Ghost.
There you go.
I'm very proud of how that one came together.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely look into that property. It's like I said, it's on my to track down list, especially when I saw the collected edition release. I was like, I really got to get on it. But I know we could just keep talking about your bibliography and we'll probably get back to it. But I was hoping we could rewind a little bit. I don't really know much about your secret origins, so I wanted to ask, how did you first get involved in the industry, in the comic book industry?
It's a great question. My trajectory was very much a zigzag. It was not a straight linear path by any means. I grew up reading comics. I'm a huge comics fan for as long as I can remember. I'm third generation. Actually, my mother grew up reading comics. My grandfather used to read me Calvin and Hobbes when I was a kid. I've been a true believer since my copy of Amazing Spider-Man 346. That just made me a lifer. And so I got my start as an intern at DC. I worked on books like Batman R.I.P. and Final Crisis. Of course, that was during the Great Recession, and so there weren't really any jobs to be had in the comics industry. But I was fortunate enough through someone I met at DC to be connected with the reviews editor at Newsarama, Troy Brownfield, who wound up becoming a real mentor to me. I worked in the comics journalism scene for many years. And I found myself kind of at a crossroads. It always comes in waves, and I'm sure you feel this way, and I'm sure your viewers feel this way. Is that sometimes you have moments where you're vibing on everything that's coming out, and then sometimes it kind of feels like you're like a Mets fan.
Yeah.
Like it's you're kind of scraping by to on the handful of books that you really like. I was
Yeah.
kind of in one of those low periods as far as what I was enjoying, and
Yeah.
I felt like I needed to make a decision. If I wasn't finding the books that I liked, then the only way I could I had to make them. And so I was like, I have to either change my relationship to comics or I need to walk away. And
Wow.
so I started by writing kind of short scripts just to get the feel of it. I wrote a short script every day for 90 days. They didn't have to be good; they just had to be finished.
Wow.
I wrote my first issue of my first creator-owned book series, Spencer and Locke. I really enjoyed that process. I wound up writing an outline. I enjoyed that. I found an artist, the amazing George Santiago Jr. He put some pages together with a letter of Colin Bell and our colorist, the late Jason Smith. And we shopped it around. A publisher said, "Hey, how soon can you get this book done?" And I kind of felt like a chill go up my spine um, because I had dipped my toe in the end of the pool so much that I fell in, and now I had to kind of sink or swim. And
Right.
thankfully, people really liked Spencer and Locke. People still really enjoy that book, and I've been kind of writing ever since. I've been lucky enough to kind of work my way up from the indies to places like Aftershock, and then that got Marvel's attention. I've been doing work over there for a few years, and then Dynamite and Mad Cave. So it's been, I pinch myself. I did not anticipate getting into a creative career. I grew up in the Midwest. I did not have any, role models, so to speak, and
Sure.
I worked as a journalist. I worked as a publicist. I worked as a Hollywood assistant. I tried every stable job, and
Right.
this was the one that I felt like I could be decent at.
Awesome.
And it really is. It's the most challenging, involved work I've ever done, but it's the most rewarding job I've ever had. This is my astronaut job, and I've
Wow.
never, even on a challenging day, I've never had a bad day in this.
Wow. That's awesome to hear.
So, yes, I am a true believer first and foremost.
Yeah. I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's always great to hear someone who like grew up just loving the medium, getting into it. So I love
Yeah,
that. A question I like to ask some of my
sure,
creators on
sure.
interviews like this are, obviously we've talked about a couple of the awesome pencilers, different artists that you've been able to work with on some of these series. But I'm
Sure.
just curious, do you have like a list of like dream collaborators that you haven't worked with yet that you would love an opportunity to do so?
Boy, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's certainly artists out there who I really admire. Jerome Pena is somebody,
Oh
Steve
yeah.
McNiven,
Mhm.
um, Fernando Persarin, who just did Green Lantern Corps this
Mm,
week. I think is such a talented artist. I'd love to work with him someday. Um, I think so much of it is for me, it's you have to pair the right artist with the right project. And so it's always hard for me to kind of think about like what artists I want to work with um,
sure.
outside of context. And also, one of the best parts of this job is as much as I feel like I know everybody in the business, I often get surprised. Amon Casalos, for example, for Captain Planet,
Right.
was somebody who I was not aware of his work before our
Mhm.
editor Joe Ryban put us together, and I
Yeah.
can't say enough good things about him. He is such an impressive collaborator. He's so thoughtful, and he really elevates every page that I do because he adds in so much cool acting to all these characters.
Right.
When you fall in love with the Planeteers, it's going to be Amon's fault. And so sometimes you find collaborators who you didn't know you'd vibe with their style. Sometimes it's
Right.
their process that is like really
Yeah.
interesting. I
Yeah.
worked on a two-parter with Juan Cabal, for
Oh,
example,
wow.
on Fantastic Four. I know he just did some stuff on Birds of Prey recently. um,
Right.
Juan, it was a dream collaborator to work with. His process was so interesting, but also similar to Amon. He made a lot of cool storytelling choices that weren't even in my script, but they
Yeah.
elevated all of it. Jonathan Lau is another example of that.
Yeah.
Where he makes choices in the script. Sometimes he calls an audible, and the thing is, I can't get mad at it because they're always excellent. They're always excellent choices. So yeah, I think it's that's the alchemy of it all, and you never know kind of what you're going to get until you're thrown in the middle of it. And that's why I think that is an editor's best skill. And the best editors in the business are able to kind of really figure that out. Is they know how to staff a project in a way that feels exciting, that really leverages the strengths of all involved, and really kind of plays to the heart of the story. And those are the editors I really admire. It's so easy, given how many comics are out today. It would be easy to treat a book like a statistic. And I've been so fortunate to work with editors like Joe Rybant at Dynamite, or Tom Brevoort at Marvel, or Mike Martz and Christina Harrington and Chaz Pangburn at Mad Cave Studios, where I've never been treated like a statistic. And that is, I think, a big element of why I've been able to have the career I've had.
Yeah, I love that. Well, speaking of segues, I know earlier you mentioned how your kind of take on X-Men can be seen like in Captain Planet in a way, like it's kind of an homage. But you are or have been working on Cable over at Marvel. I would love, as a fellow X-Men fan, I don't know where my omnibuses are. I got some collected editions down there. What can you tell me about that project? How'd you get involved with Cable?
Yeah, so Cable's been in the works for a minute. I believe I started working on that almost a year ago.
Wow.
I think a little less than a year ago. And I've already finished writing the project, and we're almost done with everything behind the scenes with it. But yeah, the way that project came together was I was very fortunate. Ever since I started work at Marvel, I've worked primarily with Tom Brevoort. Who is a legendary editor and the best editor I've ever had. And I've always seen him as very much a mentor. I've learned so much from him, and any book of mine past like 2022 that of mine, Tom has had a huge influence on whether or not he's edited it. And so, we've worked together on several projects like Savage Avengers and Moon Knight City of the Dead and my Punisher miniseries. And as I was wrapping up my Punisher miniseries, we were originally talking about possibly doing more after that. But Tom was drafted in to taking over the X-Men line. And so Tom was very nice that he messaged me before the news came out. So I heard it from him rather than anyone else, saying, "Hey, I'm going to be taking over the X-Men line. Let's put a pin on any sort of Punisher plans because I'm not going to be editing it anymore. But would you have any interest in doing anything in the X-Men office?" And I'm 90s trash. I love the X-Men. I love them since Pride of the X-Men, since Fatal Attraction, since Age of Apocalypse. I think it's a combination of like the mutant metaphor and how timely that is, and for anyone from any sort of marginalized community. I grew up Jewish, and so like I know kind of instinctively what it feels like not to be part of the cultural norm. But also kind of the sprawling mythology of it all, the crazy continuity. And so I've been an X-Men fan, but it's funny. I do feel like out of there's a certain X-Men reader that loves the continuity, loves the sprawling, retcon on retcon. And I always say that Cable is the most X-Men of all the X-Men in that regard. He has such a sprawling history that really has been kind of like a patchwork thing, of just creators kind of being like, okay, and yes, and to use improv terms. And so Tom asked me, would you have any interest in Cable? And he had expressed interest in doing a story that was kind of like a time travel romance. And his rationale for that was, we want to be able to have a story that kind of feeds into the larger than life action that a good Cable story deserves, and leverages his ability as a time traveler, to go places that other X-Men can't, but also kind of gives like an emotional vulnerability to him, that they were able to peel back the layers a little bit. And my counter to Tom was, well, this was a 5-issue miniseries, and Cable has had other love interests like Domino and Esme Cuckoo and Hope Summers' namesake and Jen Scott, and people that have had a longer runway. And so the question that we kind of left it on was, okay, how do we have a love story for Cable that kind of justifies itself given the runway? And what wound up happening is my wife was the thing that kind of made the light bulb go off. We were walking around. We have a park nearby our apartment. We were walking through the park, and she asked me, "What's Cable's deal? What makes him different from anybody else?" She's not like a native comics fan.
Sure.
She's a voracious fiction reader, and she's kind of my North Star whenever I work in a script.
Sure.
If she understands it, a civilian can understand it. If she doesn't get it, it's too esoteric and it's too in the weeds.
Yeah.
And so as I thought about it, I was like, well, the X-Men have other telepaths, right? They've got other gun guys. They've got other time travelers, for Pete's sake. What's the thing that Cable has that's unique about him that nobody else has? And the thing that occurred to me was it's the techno-organic virus. That this is a character that he's a time traveler living on borrowed time, and that this is a disease that he's been holding back using his telekinesis and sheer force of will, but he knows that one day that's going to fail and this virus is going to consume him. And I realized that that's a parallel to real people who are living with chronic, sometimes terminal conditions, whether it's cancer or ALS or Parkinson's or leukemia, or just, a chronic condition like Crohn's, for example. There are people who, that's their life. They're they have to figure out how do they live their lives with these conditions. And I thought that was an interesting through line for Cable to make him a character that's known for his 90s excess and known for his sprawling continuity, to make him resonant to real people. And so that became the heart of our story, is that in Cable, Love and Chrome, Cable winds up stranded in the dystopian city of Salvation Bay, where it turns out the techno-organic virus has become an ongoing concern. And so Cable suddenly, for the first time in his life, meets somebody else with the same condition that he's had.
Interesting.
And so his new love interest, Avery Ryder, she kind of forces him to start examining these things a little bit. I pitched the book as Edge of Tomorrow meets The Fault in Our Stars. With the
okay, that's a fun mashup.
Stars. And Avery, the difference between Cable and Avery is Cable's had to deal with this kind of by himself. Like, he's had loved ones, but nobody really understands his internal struggle. Avery is really the externalization of that inside conflict. And she's had a community. So she's been able to kind of think about this, thinking about the ethics of it all, and thinking about it's introduced some interesting texture that I haven't been able to really approach in another book. For example, if you have a terminal condition, like the techno-organic virus, how do you feel about dying in a hospital bed? Or are you going to die out with your boots on? If you know that tomorrow isn't guaranteed, how do you make the most of every second? And also, if you don't have something worth living for, if you're just surviving, but if you don't have something that really inspires you, something that that fills your life and gives it meaning, hasn't the virus already won? And so that's been some really interesting kind of conversations that have been a part of this book, in addition to all the amazing kind of over-the-top, larger-than-life action and time travel that you need to tell a good Cable story. So I feel like we've really been able to have our cake and eat it too with that book. I've been so thrilled with the response to it. Issue 2 of that book just came out yesterday. So you can pick it up at your local comic shop. And it'll be a 5-issue mini. But we've got some really fun stuff planned. We're going to be pushing kind of the limits of time and space further and further and further as the series continues from here.
Right on. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit about that. I do have a couple sort of more rapid fire questions for you, if you don't mind. We've talked about some of the books you've worked on or are working on, but I'm certainly no expert in all of your writing yet at this point. But I'd be curious for anyone who's watching, what would you consider maybe one or two of basically your definitive David Pepose
Mm,
reading experiences. What would make the
yeah.
list for you of like go-to recommendations that you say for whatever reason, whether it's a project that just best represents you or you feel like you put a lot into it, you're proud of the final product in a special way. What's maybe
Sure.
one or two representations that you would just say, I would recommend these for someone who wants to check out my work?
Yeah, I'd certainly recommend Space Ghost. I think that has sort of been a lot of the stuff that I've learned writing superhero books. I think I've been able to really put all that into practice on Space Ghost. My run on Savage Avengers was super fun. I think as far as creator-owned work, it's out of print, but Spencer and Locke, if you can get your hands on it, that was my first book, and I love it. It's very scrappy, warts and all. But more recent creator-owned work, The Devil That Wears My Face, over at Mad Cave Studios. It's Face Off meets The Exorcist. And I'm very proud of the work that Alex Cormack and I did on that. So yeah, I think those are kind of the books that if you want to get to know me, you should definitely check those out. I think those are not only the books that feel like the most like me, but I think they are, it's, you're always trying to refine your process. And I think,
Right.
anybody who thinks that they've got it all figured out is either deluded or lying to you. And I feel like those are the books that I have figured it out the most. So I'm very proud of how those have all turned out. And you should definitely check them out.
Right on. And then this is a much broader question, and I'm sorry
Sure.
to maybe if it's, I've blindsided some creators with this. It's nothing bad, but you mentioned being a big comic book fan, kind of, they've been in your life for some time.
Sure.
Do you have a short list of, hey, when you see someone who's just getting into comics, what are two or three kind of comics that you often recommend to someone? And I understand this could be case by
Boy,
case, and there's probably a million, but what are some go-to like comic greats that you say, this has my stamp that I would say, check it out,
boy, that's tricky, because there's so many, I try to be an evangelist for these sorts of things. But it's tricky. You always find that there are interesting hurdles that you wouldn't expect as a longtime comics fan that could stop up somebody new. For example,
Sure.
I for a long time really wanted to do. I always wanted to show people Batman Year One,
Yeah.
and they would get tripped up by the cursive. You know,
Oh, interesting.
or if the art is considered quote unquote too dated, so I think, it kind of depends on, I try to tailor it for who they are and what I know of them.
Sure.
I think Batman The Long Halloween is great because, it's a Batman story. Everybody knows who Batman is, and you get to kind of figure out who all the villains are. So that's a really fun one. Let's see what else is there. Um, you know, uh, Boy, I'm trying to think of some other. Chew is another good one. I think
Wow.
that's
Yeah.
very accessible. Um, what else is another good one? Um, I I mean, I'm a big fan of J. Michael Straczynski's Spider-Man, but I get that might be a little esoteric for somebody just starting out. Um, yeah, I mean, I've never tried introducing anybody to Afterlife with Archie, but I wonder if they would enjoy it. I think that'd be kind of a fun thing to try to
That's
pitch
a fun
somebody on.
onboarding one.
Um, but yeah, I think you're just trying to kind of like, I think it's so often, especially if people know comics and they're interested in comics and they want to get into it, chances are they've seen one of the movies or the TV shows. And honestly, I mean, that's how I started, I mean, it was pre-TV shows and all that, but I was just like, oh, I really like Spider-Man. I'm going to read a bunch of Spider-Man comics. And
Yeah.
so I think it really is, you got to tailor it to the target a little bit.
Yeah.
And listen, I can't always say I'm successful. My wife doesn't, she reads my comics, but like she's not a comics person.
Sure.
And that was me pitching her, like Rainbow Rowell's Runaways.
Yeah.
That was me pitching her Thor, the Somni Thor, with
Sure.
Roger Langridge. Trying to find stuff that just kind of was funny and accessible and cute and emotional. So you really,
Right.
you never really know. There's no good answer for it. There's no silver bullet.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, just trying to tailor it to who you're targeting to. But I think Long Halloween and Chew are certainly two excellent
Awesome.
places to start.
Love it. Love hearing it. Cool. And then to kind of land the plane, because I want to be sensitive to your time, but I know this last week, speaking to you a little bit as we were coordinating for this interview,
Yeah,
you mentioned that you're also attached to a speed racer project.
I am. Yeah,
You're
that'll be
you're
kicking off.
getting gold. You are getting some really really fun sandboxes to play in. What
It's
can you
been
tell me, if anything, about that series?
Sure. So our run on Speed Racer is kicking off on Free Comic Book Day. So it'll be actually a week after Captain Planet debuts. And yeah, I'm really excited for that book. I watched all the original episodes. I took very detailed notes. So we're doing similar to what I'm doing on Space Ghost and Captain Planet. There's a brand new continuity. You don't have to watch the show or the movie to get in, to get in on the ground floor. But we are going to be sort of introducing like these classic characters, with in all new contexts. So yeah, I pitched Speed Racer as Rocky in a race car. There's
Wow.
there's
Okay.
there's elements of Drive and Baby Driver and even a little bit of Fast and Furious in there. But this is the story of how Speed Racer goes from doing just back alley street races to becoming the champion of the Formula X League, and
Yeah.
what kind of puts him on that path. Why does he need to win the championship? The stakes are incredibly high for that, and yeah, I think I'm really, excited for how that book's coming together. We're working with a really talented artist that we have not announced yet, but I'm very excited for people to see them. It's someone who I've actually worked with before, so you can dig in my League of Comic Geeks profile and try to guess who that is. But yeah, when Mad Cave approached me for this book, it was at San Diego Comic-Con last year.
Yeah.
Um, I've worked with them on a book called The Devil That Wears My Face. It was such a wonderful experience. And Chaz Pangburn over there has been trying to get me to do licensed work for a minute. And it's sort of always a combination of either my schedule not working out or I didn't really know the license well enough
Yeah.
to feel like I could offer like a solid take. But Chaz pulled me aside doing a signing at the Mad Cave booth and said, so we've been doing it, we've been working with Tatsunoko Productions on Gotcha Man, and that's been a big success for all involved. And so we're actually getting the rights to Speed. Sorry about that. We're getting the rights to Speed Racer.
Mhm.
And sorry, they're testing the sprinkler in my apartment.
No, I get it.
Um,
I was honestly not sure if that was me. I was like,
no, that's me. They're testing the building's like whole fire system.
okay.
So the thing that was so interesting to me was he said, Speed Racer, and my immediate thought was car chases.
Yeah.
And I love writing car chases.
Mhm.
I did it in my first two volumes of Spencer and Locke. I did a little in my book Scout's Honor, even a little
Yeah.
bit in my creator-owned book The OZ.
Yeah.
We even did a horse and buggy carriage chase in The Devil That Wears My Face. If I can fit in a car
Wow.
chase somewhere, I will.
Yeah.
Because I'm a huge fan of like what Trad Moore did on Ghost Rider or what
Sure.
David Aja did on Hawkeye, for example. I
Yeah.
think the medium, it's easy to overlook car chases in this medium.
Yeah.
And so the idea of, oh, I have a 16 issue runway to do car chases every issue.
Wow.
That's dope.
Yeah.
And I immediately, it was one of those things like the idea like burrowed itself in my head immediately. And
Yeah.
I was just like, yeah, like this feels like the kind of offer like one can't refuse.
Love it.
Just given both like the legacy that Speed Racer has, but also just like it's a sports comic in an industry that isn't always necessarily friendly to sports
Yeah.
comics. So yeah, I'm very excited for that book. We have a long runway, like I was saying,
Yeah.
16 issues, including Free
That's great.
Comic Book Day. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's gonna be a really fun book and very unlike anything else I've done elsewhere. Not only is there the action of it all, the races and all that, but getting to see who Speed is I think that's very exciting, and getting to sort of see the Racer family kind of coming together. Seeing
Yeah.
Pops as kind of like his hard bitten coach who's got his own complications going on. Trixie, who's going to be his Carol Ferris in a lot of ways.
Oh, wow.
She owns the racing team that Speed
Yeah.
has to compete in, and so how do you navigate a romance with your boss?
Yeah.
Spritel, his younger brother, I'm so excited. Out of all the original Speed Racer cartoons, Spritel might be the thing that might have aged the worst out of all that. And so
Sure.
the way that we recontextualized him is, he's precocious. He
Yeah.
is he's streetwise. He's the guy who is not only live streaming Speed's races to rack up subscribers and sponsors, but he's
Yeah.
egging on everybody watching the race to bet higher and higher and higher because he knows Speed's going to win.
Wow.
And
I love
so
that.
he's really a fun character. And then of course Racer X,
Yeah.
who he's such a fun character.
Yeah.
He's Batman meets James Bond in a race car. Like how
Yeah.
cool is that?
Gotta do
And
Racer X.
yeah, so he'll be kind of weaving in and out of our storyline. And Mark Russell is doing a Racer X spinoff book that is
Wow.
excellent. So
Awesome.
yeah, I'm really thrilled with how that book is coming together. I'm about to kind of kick off the run. I wrote our free comic book day issue a couple months back, and so I'm about to kind of dive into the thick of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be this is a fun book, and it's just an opportunity to tell a different type of story than I think I'd be able to tell anywhere else.
Yeah.
And so I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, I've been really thankful for this opportunity, David. You're welcome to come back and promote anything on here
Oh,
anytime.
thank you.
Be on the lookout for that Speed Racer book coming on Free Comic Book Day. Please check out Captain Planet, which will also be available, I think, within the coming months we've talked about. Or like me, catch up on Space Ghost. Can't wait for that. And then,
Yeah.
of course, for Marvel fans like me as well, that Cable series is one I definitely want to try to pick up. But yeah, thank you again so much, David, for being so generous with your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All righty. Thanks, everyone.
I hope you enjoyed today's interview. Please don't forget to leave this video a like, comment, and maybe share with a friend. Thanks, and have a good one.